This was the week where 25-year-old Air Force service member Aaron Bushnell of San Antonio, Texas, lit himself on fire outside of the Israeli embassy in DC in protest of the US's complicity in genocide. I do not want to show the video, but I will explain and we'll talk about what happened. So this is Aaron, a photo of him, and this is what happened. He live streamed himself actually on Twitch, and he begins by introducing himself. He says, "My name is Aaron Bushnell. I'm an active duty member of the U.S. Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." The video shows Aaron continuing to film as he walks to the gate of the Israeli embassy in DC, puts down his phone, douses himself in a flammable liquid, and sets himself alight, shouting, "Free Palestine," several times. After he collapses, police officers who had been watching the situation unfold run into the frame, one with a fire extinguisher and another with a gun. The officer continues pointing the gun at Aaron for over 30 seconds as Aaron lies on the ground burning. And this is a photo. It's blurred out, but this is the officer just pointing a gun at a man just completely engulfed in flames. Ridiculous. Okay, we can put that reaction aside, but more about Aaron. This is what he wrote on Facebook. Just hours before, he wrote, "Many of us ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery or the Jim Crow South or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is you're doing it right now." Lance, I don't mean to kick it to you immediately, but what were your thoughts when you saw this story break?
Um, I saw probably like a series of the most cruel and worst takes appear immediately right after
Mm,
the story was like an ongoing story, especially online. And then I didn't think that this would be something immediately that would be weaponized the next day. I mean, I should have, it's pretty typical to see people being like, well, now the left has lost their minds. They're advocating for people to do this, they're encouraging this, or this is them encouraging people to commit self-harm or anything of that nature. And that's utterly absurd. First off, I think it's doing a huge disservice to someone who made a very clear statement, right? That this is the reason I'm doing this action. I'm going to say this, I'm going to live stream it so no one can deny this is the reason why I'm doing this, and I'm going to scream words out loud as I'm doing this act, right?
mhm.
Because this act is so horrifying, that's why people are reacting in the way they did to it, right? It's not to celebrate anyone causing self-harm or hurting themselves or burning themselves alive. That's not the purpose. It's like, this is so shocking and striking. It's why it's been done as a form of protest before, as an extreme form of protest.
Yes.
And yes, certainly, I'm sure every single person in your audience knows that, like, if you are having troubles with mental health or stuff like that, please go access the multiple resources in your city, town, or area that you have access to. You know, me in Canada, there's phone numbers that you can access to, and please go do that. But that conversation never comes up in regards to other examples. Like, people pulled up a picture of Hillary Clinton holding up a photo of a 16-year-old who burnt themselves lives in protest, but that was for a different conflict. There's, of course, the person who did it to protest the Vietnam War, and there was no like immediate. Well, we should be talking about mental health and whether or not we're separating people at the
Right.
same.
Nobody told the Buddhist monk he was protesting the treatment of Buddhists in Vietnam, Thich Quang Duc in 1963, in that incredible photo of him. No one was like, "Oh, he was just mentally disturbed." He was a monk. The most, like, arguably mentally secure and sound. Dude meditates all day. Like,
Mm.
that's the deal. And he was like, "No,
He
this is
apparently
a
moved or
protest."
flinch or anything. He like that apparently was like, it was jaw dropping to people to witness, and that like they couldn't believe he stood there completely like without any kind of signs of pain or stuff. I'm like, that
Right.
is obviously a level of I don't even know what's going on there. That's all I can
Of
tell you.
sacrifice, right? And I think that is what's really important. Like, when I saw this story, I think two things. I do feel like he made an incredible point. I don't know if I would call him a hero, because I don't, again, there is something about, like, valorizing, like, this. I'm not, it's not bad to valorize it, but he did something incredibly courageous and he died for this cause. That's what he did. And so that's my first instinct, that he's courageous. And my second instinct is, I hope that number one, that it breaks through, and number two, that also that we can move this I think, past the point of desperation and into a point of action, meaning, and I know, look, this is, I'm not going to judge his particular action, but I do want for all of us to actually figure the hell out how we turn this into a movement inside the armed forces, outside of the armed forces, like, to actually bring about an end to this genocide, you know? So again, mine isn't, I'm not scolding nor valorizing anyone. But I do think what he did was incredibly brave, and it did break through. Mainstream media did have to cover it, and that was also thanks to an independent journalist, Talia Jane, who ripped the video before it had a chance to be taken down by Twitch. And then it was covered. Here's Andrea Mitchell, and again, sort of in the same breath, immediately talking about, you know, mental health. So take a look.
Yesterday, 25-year-old Aaron Bushnell of San Antonio, Texas, the active duty airman in the U.S. Air Force who set himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy in an apparent protest against the Israel-Hamas war, has died. That identification made by Metropolitan Police here. Bushnell filmed his own self-immolation on his cell phone, yelling, "Free Palestine," before collapsing to the ground outside the embassy. He was rushed to the hospital for treatment, but later succumbed to his injuries. And if you or someone you know is in crisis, call or text 988 to reach the suicide aid.
You know who's in crisis? The people of Gaza are in crisis. Like, good on Andrea Mitchell for accurately reporting that it was a protest, but also the immediate answer isn't just a suicide hotline. There was a purpose to this particular, you know, I think dying was secondary to making his voice heard, right? As morbid as that might sound to some people, and he also wasn't the first person to do this. In December, a woman also self-immolated. She apparently has survived, although sadly we have not heard about her story until this story broke. These are two people. Lastly on this, though, Lance, is that there could be an angle here around how much someone like Aaron Bushnell, an Air Force service member, was involved in either aiding and abetting, you know, Israeli genocide. This was Ken Klippenstein reported for The Intercept in January that the administration has gone to lengths to conceal the nature of its support for the Israeli military, but the Pentagon quietly tapped a so-called Tiger team to facilitate weapons assistance to Israel, and it also declined to reveal which weapon systems it was providing and which quantities, blah, blah, blah. But on top of that, and more relevant, on November 21st, the U.S. Air Force issued deployment guidelines for officers, including intelligence engagement officers headed to Israel. Experts say that a team of targeting officers like this would be used to provide satellite intelligence to the Israelis for purpose of offensive targeting. So again, and we know from like whistleblowers who've done drone programs or resistors or conscientious objectors in wars past that often these covert operations we're not talking about them. You know, we're not, you know, the idea that the Air Force was involved in helping Israel find targets inside of Gaza, that's not openly discussed. So who knows what Aaron Bushnell himself was called upon to do? Who knows what he did? He said, "I won't be complicit in this." We don't know if his role as an Air Force service member actually uniquely implicated him in more of a direct role in this genocide. Final thoughts on this?
I don't know if this is just breaking, but Ken just put out another story where I think he had done research into his background. He apparently worked in IT and did a lot of kind of like information and data filtering. So Ken explains it really succinctly, where he puts it that this is usually unsung quote unquote heroes of some kind of aspect of the military apparatus who are basically responsible for ingesting and filtering through vast amounts of information. They usually have access to lots of information related to things like horrifying atrocities, war crimes, and stuff like that. While at the same time, they're not directly involved in kind of like the boots on the ground drill sergeant. Like, you've got to basically have one way of looking at the world, and that is take orders, right?
Right.
And so that creates a very unique situation where you have an individual who may become radicalized within the Imperial Corps, or whatever you want to call it, within the actual military industrial complex, working within it, similar to how people like Edward Snowden, for example, became big leakers of information in a very similar position inside the system itself.
Right. Or Chelsea Manning.
Yes, exactly.
And so many, and And so many, yeah, and again, drone operators, and especially in IT and in tech, like you have access, like you're saying, to so much information, and you're also called upon to like get coordinates on so-called terrorists. Although who knows, given the kill rate that Israel's got. So, but thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, everybody check that. Check out a new piece by Ken Klippenstein, what Aaron Bushnell did in the military. So he goes into it a little bit more in depth.